Have you ever felt like your life was being dismantled, brick by brick? You lose friends, opportunities vanish, and the silence from heaven feels deafening. You think you're being punished, but what if you're actually being prepared? You aren't losing your mind, you are being chosen. This is the story of Elena, and if you recognize yourself in her struggle, pay close attention. These are the 9 signs God is quietly setting you apart. Focus signs: sudden isolation, the collapse of comfort, heightened sensitivity. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime on the sidewalk slicker. Elena stood outside the glass doors of Sterling & Finch, the city's most prestigious marketing firm, holding a cardboard box that contained the last 5 years of her life. A succulent, a stapler, and a framed photo of a team that had just voted to fire her. At 32, Elena was supposed to be the vice president of communications. She was supposed to be planning a June wedding. She was supposed to be happy. Instead, in the span of 72 hours, the foundation of her existence had cracked, crumbled, and collapsed into dust. It started on a Tuesday. Elena had walked into her apartment, excited to show her fiancé, Marcus, the venue brochures. Marcus was a man who looked good on paper, successful, charming, a deacon at their church. But when she walked in, the air felt heavy, thick. Elena had always possessed a strange, intuitive radar. Sign number 1, heightened sensitivity. She could walk into a room and physically feel the emotional temperature. For years, she called it anxiety. She didn't know yet that it was discernment. Marcus wasn't alone. He was on the phone, his voice hushed, breathless. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He hung up too quickly. "We need to talk," he said. The 4 words that act as the bell toll for a dying relationship. He didn't leave her for another woman. He left her for space. He told her she was too intense. "You're always digging, Elena," he had said, pacing their living room. "You can't just let things be. You analyze everything. You talk about spiritual things until it's exhausting. I just want a normal life. You're heavy." Heavy. The word echoed in her mind as she stood in the rain outside her office. 2 days after Marcus left, her boss, Julian, called her into his office. Julian was a man Elena had defended for years. She had covered his mistakes, stayed late to fix his reports, and credited him for her ideas. She was loyal to a fault. "The board is restructuring," Julian said, refusing to meet her eyes. He tapped a pen nervously against his mahogany desk. "We feel your ethical stance on the Klein account is becoming a liability." The Klein account involved a pharmaceutical company pushing a drug they knew had dangerous side effects. Elena had refused to write the press release burying the data. She thought she was doing the right thing. She thought integrity mattered. "So I'm fired for having a conscience?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "You're being let go for cultural incompatibility," Julian corrected coldly. Now, standing on the curb, soaking wet, Elena felt the first crushing wave of sign number 2, sudden, unexplainable isolation. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Sarah. Elena answered, desperate for a lifeline. "Sarah, it happened. They fired me, and Marcus is gone. I don't know what to do." There was a pause on the other end. Too long of a pause. "Elena, look." Sarah's voice was tight, distant. "I heard about Marcus, and honestly, maybe he's right. You've been different lately. Hard to be around. I think maybe I need some space, too. Just for a while." The line went dead. Elena lowered the phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. It felt like a conspiracy. How could everyone she loved, everyone she trusted, turn their backs at the exact same moment? It felt synchronized. It felt cruel. She hailed a cab, climbed in, and gave the driver her address. As the city blurred past the window, she closed her eyes and whispered, "God, where are you? Why are you punishing me?" She expected an answer, a feeling of comfort, a Bible verse popping into her head. But there was nothing. Just the sound of tires on wet pavement and the hollow ache in her chest. This was the beginning of the most terrifying sign of all, though she didn't recognize it yet. She was entering the hidden season, the time when God hides his chosen vessels not to discard them, but to protect them from the fallout of the demolition he is performing. Elena didn't know that the loss of Marcus and the loss of her job weren't rejections. They were evacuations. God was clearing the building before it exploded. That night, alone in her apartment, the silence was absolute. She tried to pray, but the words felt like they were hitting the ceiling and falling back down like ash. She felt utterly rejected by earth and ignored by heaven. She walked to her mirror. Her mascara was running, her eyes red. "What is wrong with me?" she sobbed. She didn't see the spiritual reality. She only saw the wreckage. She didn't realize that to build a skyscraper, you must first dig a deep hole. The deeper the foundation, the higher the structure. And God was digging. Focus signs, spiritual warfare, the drying up of resources, the inability to fix it. 3 weeks later, Elena was in the thick of the wilderness. If part 1 was the explosion, part 2 was the fallout. The bank account was draining. The interviews she went on, jobs she was overqualified for, ended with polite rejections. "You're just not the right fit," they said. It was baffling. Elena was an award-winning strategist, but it was as if an invisible hand was closing every door she approached before she could even turn the handle. This was sign number 3, the drying up of resources. When God wants to move you, he often makes the place you are currently standing uncomfortable. He dries up the brook, just as he did for Elijah. He allows the famine to hit the land. He removes the crutches so you have no choice but to lean on him. But Eleanor didn't feel leaned on. She felt attacked. The nights were the hardest. This brought sign number 4, intense spiritual warfare. Elena began having vivid, terrifying dreams. She would dream of wolves circling her, or of trying to run through waist-deep mud while a dark shadow pursued her. She would wake up at exactly 3 a.m., heart racing, drenched in sweat, a feeling of dread sitting on her chest like a physical weight. She tried to rationalize it. Stress, she told herself. Just stress. But it was specific. The anxiety wasn't just about money. It was an existential assault on her identity. Thoughts she knew weren't hers, whispered in her ear. "You are a failure. You missed your destiny. God has forgotten you. You will end up alone and destitute." One Tuesday morning, desperate for distraction, Elena went to a small coffee shop on the edge of town, far away from the places her old colleagues frequented. She sat in the back corner with her laptop, mindlessly scrolling through LinkedIn, feeling the sting of jealousy as she saw Sarah, her former best friend, posting photos of a brunch with Marcus. They were together. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in her gut. Marcus had called her heavy, but he was with Sarah, who was known for being shallow and easygoing. Elena slammed her laptop shut, tears springing to her eyes. She ran to the bathroom, locking the door, gasping for air. "Why?" she screamed in a whisper. "I tried to be good. I went to church. I tithed. Why do the wicked prosper while I lose everything?" She washed her face, forcing herself to calm down. As she exited the bathroom, she bumped into an older woman carrying a tray of tea. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Elena apologized, reaching out to steady the woman. The woman was striking, silver hair tied in a loose bun, wearing a simple wool coat, but her eyes were piercingly blue and young. She looked at Elena, and for a second, the bustling noise of the coffee shop seemed to fade. The woman didn't look at the spilled tea. She looked directly at Elena's forehead, then into her eyes. "The crushing is for the oil, my dear," the woman said softly. Elena froze. "Excuse me?" The woman smiled, a sad but knowing smile. "You feel like you're being buried. I can see it on you. The weight, the rejection." She reached out and touched Elena's arm. Her hand was warm. "But you aren't being buried. You've been planted." Elena stepped back, unnerved. "Who are you?" "Just someone who recognizes the marks of the potter's thumb," the woman said. "My name is Mrs. Halloway. I sit here every Tuesday. You're in the wilderness, Elena. It's a dry place, a lonely place. But it's the only place where he can speak without competition." Elena felt a shiver go down her spine. I don't know what you mean." "You lost the man. You lost the job. You lost the friends." Mrs. Halloway listed them as if reading a grocery list. "And now the enemy is screaming in your ear at 3 a.m. that it's all over." Elena's mouth dropped open. She hadn't told a soul about the 3 a.m. wake-ups. "That is sign number 5, Mrs. Halloway whispered. "The enemy attacks what he fears. If you were insignificant, the devil wouldn't bother with you. You'd be sleeping like a baby. The warfare is confirmation of your value. You are a threat to darkness, so darkness is trying to take you out before you realize who you are." Elena felt tears spilling over again, but this time they weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of relief. Someone saw her. "Sit with me," Mrs. Halloway commanded gently. For the next hour, Elena poured everything out. The Clean account, Julian, Marcus, the nightmares. Mrs. Halloway listened, nodding. "You see, Elena, you have the gift of discernment. That sensitivity you hate? It's your weapon. You sensed the corruption in the Klein account when others ignored it. You sensed Marcus's shallowness. God removed them because where he is taking you, you cannot bring compromise. If you had married Marcus, you would have been tied to a man who would have capped your spiritual growth. If you had stayed at that firm, their corruption would have eventually tainted your spirit." "But I have nothing left," Elena whispered. "No," Mrs. Halloway corrected. "You have nothing false left. There is a difference. Now we must deal with the reason why you attracted these things in the first place. We have to break the cycle." Mrs. Halloway leaned in. "Tell me about your father." Elena stiffened. She never talked about her father. He was a charismatic man, a community leader, who had secretly gambled away the family savings and left her mother when Elena was 12. He was complicated, Elena said. "He was a man who chose public image over private integrity," Mrs. Halloway surmised, "and you attracted a fiancé exactly like him. Marcus was your father, repackaged, and Julian, your boss, was another version. You have been fighting a generational curse, Elena. That is sign number 6. The pattern repeats until you break it." Elena felt a heavy realization settle over her. She had spent her life trying to please men who were incapable of valuing her, trying to win the love her father never gave. "God has isolated you so he can heal the father wound," Mrs. Halloway said. "He couldn't heal it while you were busy planning a wedding and running a department. He had to stop the car to change the engine." Elena looked out the window. The rain had stopped. A single ray of sun was piercing through the grey clouds, illuminating the wet pavement. "So what do I do?" Elena asked. "How do I get out of the wilderness?" "You don't run out," Mrs. Halloway said sternly. "You grow out. You stop chasing what left you, and you start chasing the one who kept you. Go home, open your Bible to Isaiah 43, and stop looking for a job. Start asking God for your assignment." Elena left the coffee shop that day. Her bank account was still empty. Her apartment was still lonely, but the fear was gone. She realized she wasn't a victim of bad luck. She was a woman in training. But the test wasn't over. In fact, the greatest temptation was about to arrive. 3 days later, the phone rang. It was Julian. "Elena," his voice was smooth, dripping with false charm. "Look, we made a mistake. The team is falling apart without you. We want you back. Title bump, 20% raise. Marcus is consulting for us now, and he suggested we bring you back. He misses you, Elena. He wants to make it work." The golden handcuffs were being dangled. Everything she thought she wanted was being offered back to her on a silver platter. All she had to do was say yes, and the pain would stop. She could have her life back. But as she held the phone, she felt that familiar physical sensation, the heat, the nausea, the discernment. She was standing at the crossroads. One path led back to comfort and compromise. The other led into the unknown dark, where only God stood. She took a breath. Focus signs, a disinterest in old ambitions, supernatural peace in chaos, protection disguised as rejection. Elena held the phone, her knuckles turning white. On the other end, Julian's breathing was heavy, waiting for her answer. "Elena," Julian pressed. "Did you hear me? 20% raise, vice president title, and Marcus, he's willing to try again. He says he made a mistake." The old Eleanor, the one from 3 weeks ago, would have wept with gratitude. This was the miracle she had prayed for, the restoration of her status, her income, and her relationship. It was the normal life returning to her. But as she stood there, listening to the offer, she felt something strange. It was sign number 7, the taste of ash. When God sets you apart, he changes your spiritual appetite. What used to satisfy you suddenly makes you sick. Elena looked around her small, quiet apartment. She thought about Mrs. Halloway's words, "You don't run out of the wilderness, you grow out." She realized with a jolt that she didn't want Marcus back. The thought of him, his conditional love, his criticism, his need for her to be less, felt suffocating. And the job? Going back to cover up lies for a paycheck? "No," Elena said. The word was quiet, but it rang like a bell in the silence of the room. "Excuse me?" Julian laughed nervously. "Elena, don't be dramatic. You're unemployed. You're single. I'm offering you a lifeline." "No, Julian," Elena said, her voice strengthening. "I can't come back. And I don't want Marcus. Please don't call me again." She hung up. For 10 seconds, she felt a surge of adrenaline, a victorious high. Then, reality crashed in. She sank to the floor. "What have I done?" she thought. "I just threw away my only way out. Rent is due in 5 days. Panic tried to seize her throat, but underneath the panic, there was a bedrock of inexplicable calm. It was sign number 8, supernatural peace in the midst of chaos. It was the peace that passes all understanding. It didn't make sense logically, but her spirit was settling. 2 days passed. Elena spent them in prayer and reading the Book of Esther. "For such a time as this," she whispered, though she felt like she was doing nothing but waiting. On Friday morning, Elena decided to go for a walk to clear her head. She walked past a newsstand and froze. The bold black letters on the front page of the Seattle Times screamed at her, "Marketing giants indicted in pharmaceutical fraud scheme." Underneath the headline was a photo of the Sterling and Finch building being swarmed by federal agents, FBI jackets, yellow tape. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed the paper. She scanned the article, her heart hammering against her ribs. Federal agents raided the offices of Sterling and Finch this morning, following a whistleblower leak regarding the concealment of fatal side effects in the Klein pharmaceutical rollout. CEO Julian Sterling has been taken into custody. Also detained for questioning were several high-level executives. Elena read the names. There it was. Marcus Thorne. The article continued. Internal emails suggest that the fraud was orchestrated by the Vice President of Communications. Elena gasped. That was her old job. But she wasn't there. Sarah Jenkins, who was recently promoted to the role, has been named as a primary co-conspirator for signing off on the falsified documents earlier this week. Elena dropped the newspaper. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. If she had said yes to Julian 3 days ago, if she had taken the job back, if she had listened to her fear instead of her spirit, her signature would have been on those documents. She would be the one in handcuffs right now. She would be the one facing 10 years in federal prison. She fell onto a nearby bench, weeping uncontrollably. Passers-by looked at her, thinking she was having a breakdown, but she was having a breakthrough. She realized then that sign number 8 was actually protection disguised as rejection. The firing wasn't a punishment. The breakup wasn't a punishment. It was a rescue mission. God had forcefully ejected her from the building before he brought the hammer down. He had hardened Julian's heart to fire her so that she would be safe when judgment came. He had allowed Marcus to leave her for Sarah so that Sarah would take the fall, not Elena. Sarah had wanted Elena's life. She had wanted Elena's job and Elena's man, and she got them. She got the prize just in time for the ship to sink. Elena sat on that bench for an hour, watching the pigeons, feeling the magnitude of God's sovereignty. She had been crying over a man who was destined for a jail cell. She had been mourning a job that was a trap. Her phone buzzed. She expected it to be her mother, or perhaps a creditor. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" Elena answered, wiping her eyes. "Elena, this is Detective Miller with the FBI. We're going through the files at Sterling and Finch. We found a memo from 3 months ago, a refusal to sign the Klein press release written by you. Is that correct?" "Yes," Elena whispered. "That's correct." "Ma'am, that memo is the smoking gun we needed to prove intent by the other executives. You aren't a suspect, Elena. You're our star witness. And, frankly, you're the only person in that building with clean hands." Elena hung up the phone and looked up at the grey sky, which was breaking into blue. "You knew," she whispered to God. "You knew the whole time." But the story wasn't over. God doesn't just save his chosen ones from the fire. He promotes them in front of the very people who lit the match. Focus signs, sudden acceleration, restoration with interest, the Boaz arrival. The trial was the biggest news story in Seattle that year. Elena testified with a quiet dignity that captivated the courtroom. She saw Marcus sitting at the defense table, pale, gaunt, shaking. When their eyes met, he didn't look at her with arrogance anymore. He looked at her with regret, a regret so deep it looked like physical pain. He realized he had traded a diamond for a stone, and the stone had dragged him to the bottom of the ocean. After the trial, Elena became a minor celebrity, the woman who said no, the blogs called her. But fame doesn't pay rent, and Elena was still unemployed. The wilderness was ending, but the promised land hadn't appeared yet. She went back to the coffee shop to find Mrs. Halloway. She needed to tell her she was right. Mrs. Halloway was there, knitting in the corner. She didn't look surprised when Elena walked in. "So," the older woman smiled, her blue eyes twinkling. "The walls of Jericho came down, didn't they?" "They fell flat," Elena said, sitting down. "You were right, about everything. It was protection." "And now you are ready for the assignment," Mrs. Halloway said, putting her knitting needles down. "I don't know," Elena sighed. "No one wants to hire a whistleblower. I'm high risk for corporate firms." Mrs. Halloway laughed, a rich, hearty sound. "Child, do you think I sat in this coffee shop for 3 weeks just because I like the tea? The tea here is terrible." Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Halloway reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. It read, "Halloway Foundations, Global Philanthropy and Ethics." Elena's eyes widened. Halloway Foundations was one of the largest charitable organizations in the country. They funded hospitals, orphanages, and clean water initiatives worldwide. "My husband founded this company 50 years ago," Mrs. Halloway said. "Since he passed, I have been the chairwoman. We are looking for a new director of global communications, but we didn't want a resume. We wanted a character." Mrs. Halloway leaned forward. "And we needed someone who could stare down a bribe and say no. Someone who could lose everything rather than compromise the truth. We needed someone who had been tested by fire." She slid the card across the table. "I've been watching you for months, Elena. I knew about the Klein account before the FBI did. We have sources. I knew you were the one. But I had to see how you handled the crushing. You passed, Elena stared at the card. This wasn't just a job. This was a platform. A position that would pay double what she made at Sterling and Finch, with influence that actually mattered. This is sign number 9, Elena whispered. Sudden acceleration. It is, Mrs. Halloway agreed. When God restores, he doesn't just give back what you lost. He adds interest. He gives you double for your trouble. Elena started the job a week later. The transition was seamless. It was as if she had been born for it. The skills she had learned in the toxic environment of her old job were exactly what she needed to navigate the complexities of international aid. But now she was using them for good. 6 months later, Elena was attending a gala for the foundation. She wore a dress of deep emerald green, no longer the grey, blending-in colors she used to wear. She walked with her head high. She stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. The night was clear, the stars bright. "It's a beautiful view," a deep voice said beside her. Elena turned. Standing there was a man she recognized vaguely from the board meetings. David. He was the legal counsel for the foundation. Quiet, steady, intense. He wasn't charming in the way Marcus was. He was solid, like a mountain. "It is," Elena smiled. "I read your testimony from the trial," David said, turning to face her. "I've been wanting to introduce myself for a while, but I wanted to wait until the dust settled for you. It takes a rare kind of strength to walk alone." "I wasn't alone," Elena said softly. "I know," David smiled, and in his eyes she saw it. The same spirit that lived in her, lived in him. He wasn't intimidated by her strength. He was drawn to it. He didn't think she was heavy. He thought she was substantial. "I was wondering," David said, "if you'd like to get coffee? Not to talk business, just to talk." Elena looked at him. She checked her spirit. There was no anxiety, no red flags, no butterflies of insecurity. Just peace. "I'd like that," she said. As she looked back out over the city lights, Elena thought about the woman standing in the rain, with a box of office supplies, feeling like her life casually was over. She wished she could go back and whisper in her ear. She would tell her, "Hold on. The silence isn't absence. The crushing isn't death. You are being set apart." She had lost a fiancé who would have betrayed her to find a husband who would honor her. She had lost a job that would have imprisoned her to find a calling that would liberate her. She had lost her pride to find her power. God had been quiet, but he had been busy. Elena's story isn't just a story. It is a blueprint. Maybe you are in the crushing right now. Maybe you are crying over a Marcus or stressing over a Julian. You need to understand this. If God is removing people from your life, don't chase them. If doors are slamming shut, stop banging on them. You are in the hidden season. The enemy is attacking you because he sees your future. The isolation is the incubator for your anointing. Wipe your tears. Stand up. The test is almost over, and the promotion is going to be heavier than the pain. If you felt a witness in your spirit while listening to this, if you know you are being chosen, I want you to type, "I am set apart," in the comments below. Declare it. And please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share this with a sister or brother who is walking through the fire right now. It might just be the confirmation they need to keep going. Remember, the greater the crushing, the purer the oil. God bless you.